Okay, let's go ahead and get started. If you're in here, hopefully you're in here because you want to listen to the talk, and we're going to be talking about law today. The challenge with law is it's made by people who don't understand our profession, and so we're going to talk a little bit about getting involved in that process, and especially to deal with some of the laws that are created that are not appropriate or even reasonable. So who am I? I'm Jeremy Cox. I'm supertechguy. I'm a white hat hacker, and I'm on the Utah Saint Board of Trustees. I've been involved in Saintcon for many, many years, and we hope that you all are enjoying this conference. This has been one of the major growing years for us to move to a full-size venue like this, and we're just glad you're here. In my day job, I'm a network manager and the ISO for Washington County School District. And so why do we want to talk about law? Well, ultimately, everything that happens in law is going to affect us in one way or another, especially in our job as security professionals. There are so many things that get passed and get done, and the implications are far-reaching, especially if you're a pen tester, or in some cases, even if you're just working general IT. And so it's really critical that you're aware of what's going on and know what you can do to step in and say, well, wait a second, what about this? So let's look at Utah cyber law right now. It's all summed up into the Computer Crimes Act. Basically, Utah cyber law, this is it. It says a person who without authorization gains or attempts to gain access to and alters, damages, destroys, discloses, or modifies any computer network, computer property, computer system, etc., 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 and thereby causes damage to another or obtains money, property, information, or benefit for any person without legal right is guilty of, and then it goes into the different things that you're guilty of. Everything from a Class B misdemeanor to a third-degree felony. Okay, so it's pretty broad. Now the challenge with this particular law is it's very wide open to interpretation. And there's been cases of individuals who've been charged under the Computer Crimes Act that have had very without saying exactly what happened, the way that it happened was so loosely interpreted and so broadly applied to this law. What they did really probably shouldn't have been illegal, but because the law it can be so loosely interpreted, it was, and they were charged. So the challenge becomes, how do we make sure that laws get on the books that truly are representative of what they should be, and that are not so broadly, cannot be so broadly interpreted that they can be used to indict individuals who have really done nothing wrong. Okay? So, what if we took that law and let's see how we can make that law worse. Okay? So what if we did this? Utah House Bill 225 that was proposed by Representative Leffereth this year would have done this to this law. A person who with or without authorization gains or attempts to gain access to any computer and unlawfully alters, damages, destroys, etc., etc., etc. So if you're a pen tester and you have been given authorization to gain access to prove that you can gain access to a system, now what you have done is effectively against the law. Okay? Now, I talked to Representative Leffereth about his bill. I spent a lot of time with him. And the interesting thing about his bill is what he was trying to accomplish, it was nothing from the way we were interpreting it. Okay? And I think that you can attribute that easily to people who just don't understand the guts of technology like we do. And it's really hard for them as lawmakers to really understand that. And that's where we need to be able to step in and say, no, wait a second. you realize what you're doing here. Because if we do nothing, these types of bills will pass, and ultimately, we're going to have to deal with them. And a few of us may even get indicted for something that wasn't illegal, that became illegal, that probably should never have been. So let's talk about this. So where does that leave security audits? We're in trouble. So what it does do, though, is he did put a little section in there. It says it's an affirmative defense that if you're doing this to basically it says it's affirmative defense to subsections 1 and 2 that a person obtained access or attempted to obtain access for the purpose of protecting against or investigating. Basically, if you're doing a pen test, then you have an affirmative defense. Okay? And so you can go back and you can say, well, no, I was doing a pen test. This is why I did that. Okay? So there was a clause in there that gave us some wiggle room. Now, the challenge with that affirmative defense action is, okay, well, I did a pen test. Now, if somebody finds out about it and they decide, hey, we didn't like what he did, now you're going to have to defend yourself, okay? So that's going to be a challenge. And you'd have to defend yourself in every single assessment. But even worse than that is that there is a mandatory reporting law attached to it. So if somebody is aware of this particular pen test that you did at a site, then they have a mandatory responsibility to report it. Okay? Can you imagine all the paperwork and the nightmare and the loss of time that would cause? And then you have to defend yourself. You have to prove your affirmative defense. So this bill was fraught with challenges. But you know what? In the end, it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you time. It's going to cost you, your organization, time, and probably money too, to deal with these types of issues. So those are the types of bills that we're seeing. But what was the point? Well, he was mostly concerned with one thing. He was concerned with employees who retaliate against their organizations. And the entire reason for that section of the bill, okay, there was a lot more in that bill, the doxing piece, which hit the news, and there's a ton of stuff that hit that bill, but the entire reason for that part of the bill was to take care of incidents where employees retaliated against their employer. Okay? Which I can understand, hey, we've got a problem with employees who are retaliating, but this is the real kicker. If you read the current definition in the current law, authorization means having the expressed or implied consent or permission of the owner or the person authorized by the owner to give consent or permission to access a computer system, or computer network in a manner, this is the key, not exceeding the consent or permission. So if you effectively, as an employee, go in and say, hey, I'm done with this employer, I'm going to delete the database. Well, you as the employer, did you actually give that employee authorization to wipe the database clean? Because if you did, I'm sorry, it's your problem. But if you didn't, which I'd hope that no employer would ever do that, then they have effectively exceeded their authorization and then are then subject to current law as stands without modification. It's really simple. So some of these things pop up. And you go, okay, wait a second, this is already covered. Well, why is it not being, why can't they prosecute because of it? I don't know. I don't understand why they can't prosecute because of that. But these things are already covered in the law. So the challenge ultimately with putting in with or without authorization is that doing routine IT tasks would effectively make it against the law. And that's what we want to avoid. So it gets better. This is the best part. Yeah, there's more. In addition to that with or without authorization language, you also have some other things. a person who intentionally or knowingly and with or without authorization interferes with or interrupts computer services to another authorized user to receive those services is guilty of a Class A misdemeanor. So I walk into my data center. I say, okay, well, I've got to take a piece of equipment down. So I effectively walk over there, I unplug the fiber ports and unplug all the Ethernet ports, and I pull the switch out. Well, guess what? I have now committed a Class A misdemeanor. Okay? Isn't that great? Because I interrupted the guy upstream. Well, yeah, it's a planned outage. It doesn't matter. They had right to receive those services. If there's somebody who's affected by this, then I'm guilty of a Class A misdemeanor. Well, you know what? It even gets better. A person who, by means of a computer network, or computer property, computer system, or computer program, or computer data or software intentionally or knowingly interferes with interrupts a critical infrastructure is guilty of a third-degree felony. Okay, so if I go into the switch and I put interface shutdown, now I'm a third-degree felony. Can you see how this could be problematic to us in our profession, even with routine and normal operations? Yes, the critical infrastructure, so if you're in a small business, you wouldn't be classified as critical infrastructure, but any government organization, including higher ed, K-12, they're all considered critical infrastructure. Hospitals, large organizations, things like that could be classified as critical infrastructure. So, now it doesn't affect everybody, but it affects almost everybody. Okay? Kind of interesting. All right, so I shut that. Interface gig 101 shut down and third-degree felony. Welcome to the new law. Well, it didn't pass. Thank goodness. It did not pass. But the thing is laws like this show up. And they will get on the books if we're not actively watching what's happening. And so it's critical that we keep an eye on it. And why does it happen? Well, technology is complex. We all know that. Other people know that. They're aware of the complexities of that technology, but they just don't understand it. They don't understand it like you do. Yeah. You know, and you're absolutely right, because the question, for those of you who didn't understand that, they didn't hear it, was why is the laws that are currently on the books that apply generally to other aspects, why can't we apply those to technology? Why is it that we have to create new laws to apply to technology when we could use existing laws that apply to physical entrance, whatever, because they're very similar in nature. And the question is, I'm not sure why. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm going to pull that card. But there's a lot of those laws. I do know that sometimes those laws are hard to fight in court if for some reason, it's a digital thing. And so what will happen is a lawyer may argue, well, this is digital, it's not physical, so it doesn't apply. And because the judge or the jury don't understand how they do apply, because it's complex, it's technology, they don't understand it. And because of that, there's probably a lot of times when they have issues like that. And that'd be a guess. But why that happens, I couldn't tell you for sure. But the challenge is that even when there are times when we have to create laws to govern the use of technology, we have to make sure that when those laws are created that we give our input, because they are exceedingly complex issues. You know as well as I know that when you're dealing with the types of stuff that we deal with on a regular basis, that you can't sit down with someone, just an ordinary user, and completely explain what just happened. When someone hacks into a server, and the way they hack into it, they use some very complex techniques, it's really challenging to sit down and explain step by step what they did to get into that server, because it'll just go over the top. Because they're not involved in this on a day-to-day basis. They didn't study it. That's not the profession that they chose. They chose something else. And so they are challenged trying to understand these issues because they are extremely complex. So what can you do? You need to get involved. You need to be very involved. You need to reach out to your representatives. You need to reach out to your senators. You need to reach out to those people who are in that position when these types of things come around. And as you reach out to them and can explain the reasons why a law may be good or bad, and give suggestions on how to modify that law, then we have a chance to make sure that laws that end up on the books that actually get passed are laws that ought to be on the books. Because otherwise, it can be a crapshoot. Because they are complex and challenging issues. And it's not that they want, I'm not saying that anyone has any malice on the hill, that they want to pass laws that are problematic. I don't believe that's the case. But I do believe that they don't understand some of the implications of the laws that do get passed because of these complex challenges. So the only way that we can fix that is that you need to get involved. So what you do need to do to get involved is you need to keep an eye on what's currently being reviewed. And those types of things are passed during the legislative session. They're put on the website. You need to look for technology bills. Read them. Reach out to the sponsor. If the sponsor does not respond to you, reach out to your legislators. Reach out to your representatives. They can be a great asset to you because you live in their areas of responsibility. And they can be a great asset to you to help you solve those types of challenges. Why have I not been? I haven't been. I've been working directly with our representatives and the legislators as these things have come up. That's an excellent point. So read them, reach out. Reach out to the rest of us. Get us involved. The Utah Saint organization, because it's a nonprofit organization, the organization itself cannot affect law-making policy. Okay? We can't, as an organizational board, cannot do that. But as individuals, we can. And you are welcome to use the resources of the Utah Saint organization at your disposal as an individual to make these types of things known. Okay? But as an organization, we can't get involved. And spread the word. So where do you get more information? You get more information at the Utah State Legislature site, which is le.utah.gov. That information will be there as they start to go into legislative session. They will have a list of bills that are being proposed. That's where you'd find it. You'd find it on that list of bills page, which is also there. You can find out who represents you, and you can talk to them. I've had great success talking to my representatives and to our senators who represent me. And because of my position, they have been happy to listen to me because I have a security position. And they've been willing to understand that I've got some knowledge on what would happen. Your contact information is there also. And one of the committees that you ought to keep an eye on is the House Public Utilities, Energy, and Technology Committee. And most of the things that go through the House that are technology related hit that committee. Okay. So if laws like this pass, we're all going to pay the consequences. We will have to live with it. And if that has implications that are beyond what we can deal with, then we're going to have to live with it. And we may have to change it down the road. But it's a heck of a lot easier if they never show up in the first place. Okay, and that is all I have. Do I have any questions? The legislative session begins early spring, if I remember right. Can anybody correct me on that? January, thank you. It lasts, yeah. Yeah, it's not very long. Yeah, very true. The sooner the better. You want to catch those things as they hit, because you're right. And what will happen is they'll work together as a group, and then they'll pass it, and it will happen so fast that it'll make your head spin. So keep an eye on it. Yeah. Oh, definitely concerned about U.S. laws. Luckily, because of the audience, we've got a lot more. There's a lot more technology input on some of the federal laws. Now, whether or not those laws end up being good or not is a whole other issue. But right now, I'm talking about the state laws, but the federal laws definitely. If you can get involved with federal laws and the lawmaking process, which is a little more challenging, and depending on what kind of position you hold and what organization, depends on how much influence you're going to have on that level. Okay, I can't, you want to come up and use the mic? Because I heard about half of it. Sorry to make you walk all the way up there.
The question is, what's your response to people who argue that laws need to be a little bit overbroad to be able to catch some of the criminal corner cases, but prosecutorial discretion will prevent those same laws from being applied to people who are doing, say, a pen test?
Okay, the issue with that is, the major issue with that is power is problem sometimes. And I don't want to get into too much details, but I do know a guy, okay, and I have a friend who was prosecuted, and the reasons for him being prosecuted were really not that solid. Were really not that solid at all. If a prosecutor is having a bad day or has a friend that was personally affected by that, whose judgment is impaired, there's just all, or just doesn't understand it at all. And some of these smaller areas of the state, they may not understand exactly what they're doing. In fact, generally, they may not understand exactly what they're prosecuting. So when we create laws like that that are overly broad, that can be interpreted in a wide array of interpretations, that can have implications not only to the criminals, but it also can have implications to the folks that are, hey, they're just doing their job. And that's where it becomes problematic. And yeah, should the prosecutors weed out that stuff? Absolutely. Does it always happen? Unfortunately, it does not. And that's my concern with it. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.